What if I were to say to you that the way we choose to communicate with our animals could have an effect on world peace? And what if I were to say that the keys to that possibility may lie in recognizing and managing the emotional states of the animals that show up in our existence? And not just animals, but all species. Because I'm here to say that emotional states are universal. We all have moods, animals have moods. We change in a flash of a second, so do animals. You might think that in order to have access to this kind of information that you would need to have so many years of experience in being with animals, and that's not necessary. I think just being observant and having empathy and opening your heart to the feelings and the body language that you see around you is the prerequisite. That being said, I did have a background in farm childhood, and I am so grateful for that, and I embrace everything about it. I had the freedom to play in this vast playground of animal life. My brother and sister and I were able to explore the freedoms of nature, but I was the one that gravitated more towards the animals, and so much so that with all of the animals, I felt like I wanted to be a part of them. I wanted to be included by them, and I wanted to mimic the vocalizations they had. I wanted to mimic the body language they had, and I became quite good at it. As a matter of fact, chickens. Does anybody here have chickens? You know that when you make a sound, sometimes the chickens don't like the sound of it, and what do? They shake their head. Well, I would crow like a rooster, and oftentimes you'd see all these chickens, a sea of heads, just shake. That didn't sound right, that didn't sound right. I knew I'd made it when I was sitting in the barn aisle playing with some kittens, and I heard a distant rooster crow, and I crowed. And then I heard a crow again, and he was closer, and I crowed again. And then another crow, and then I crowed again. And then all of a sudden he came barreling around the corner, and he had his band of hens, and when he saw me, he just flustered and then scurried away, as if I meant to do that, you know. And so I thought, I have arrived. And then also my sister and my cousin and I were able to inspire a calf to pull us around the property. I mean, what does that take? Fast forward, I grew up into a veterinarian by all things. And so the veterinarian that I became was one that was more open to activating natural healing pathways for animals. And that's why this is such a passion for me, to understand their emotional states so that we can help to navigate to decrease the fear, anxiety, and stress on them. But I have to go back to my roots. My brother actually has that on a ringtone. Anemotionality is a term I came up with that helps to explain the diverse emotional states in the animals that shows up that day, at that time. Not yesterday, not the way they are at home, but how they are in a new setting, how they are in a comfortable setting. And that can, just like us, that can change their moods in a flash of a second. The dynamic state of these emotions, again, they're very fluid, have an effect on them in the way, number one, they are born. We have certain inherent traits that occur within us as we're born, same with animals. Certain breeds are bred for certain disciplines. There's working breeds, etc. So they have things that come to them with their innate personalities or innate emotional states. We also have learned responses. That's why rescue dogs seem to have such an issue sometimes in certain locations, or abused animals, horses that are abused in certain training facilities. I mean, we see that that can affect their anxiety levels. We've got an environment that can actually also make a difference. A windy day, for anybody who has a horse that's very, very sensitive, understands that that horse may not pay attention to you until you get their attention. The proprioception or balance, that was brought to my attention by Dr. Judith Schumacher, a colleague of mine, where again, there's a fear of falling, and if an animal is on a sensitive place that might be reflective and they can't get their grip. They feel they're going to fall, and that increases anxiety. Or horses that have feet that are unbalanced, that type of thing can also affect their mood. Hormonal influences, that seems pretty obvious. And their spirit level. Their spirit level could be low, medium, or high. And that can exacerbate or be volume control on however they express their anxieties or their concerns. And why does this seem to matter so much? I think the important thing is we owe it to our animals in our care to offer them the 5 freedoms. And the 5 freedoms are pretty basic: freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, freedom to express their natural behavior, and freedom from fear and distress. Those last 2 are the ones I feel we can do better at if we really can understand their emotional state. Then we have to realize that we've got predator and prey animals. I think it's important to make that distinction, because prey animals will react as if they're going to be eaten for lunch, whereas predators might maybe miss a meal, but they're not too concerned about the death of them. But that can change too, depending on the environment, the learned responses, et cetera. We all kind of just heard that. So prey animals have eyes on the side of their head. Think of rabbits, think of birds, think of horses even. And predators have eyes on the front of their heads, and that allows them to detect that meal, and they will intently stare at that particular subject until they have acquired that subject. And so that's why pressure from eye contact can be enough to increase that cortisol level, which is stress. And what we want to do is decrease stress wherever we can. The sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response, is important to have to get out of danger, but it's really not where we want to be when we want to heal or have a calming relationship. So it really behooves us as caregivers to try and manage that so that we can cause our animals to be out of stress. So when you manage that stress and you can cause that animal to be more calm, everything opens up. Now, how would we do this? The first thing that's the most important, I feel, is within ourselves. I think we need to make sure that we can clear our mind and have this genuine intention of wanting to care for another being, to improve their life quality. I call it literally falling in love with that patient, or with that client, or with that colleague, or with that relationship. You just want to find something that will cause you to access that joy, that higher frequency of joy and love, because that radiates, that has an aura about ourselves that can actually help to promote healing and well-being. Being a clearing for nonverbal communication, just watching that animal and watching to make sure that they are not offended by your presence. Everybody has a bubble, animals do too. Make sure that you stay within the bubble that causes comfort. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we progress here. And then mindfulness is so important. Being present and being in the moment, because we all have that clutter in our brain. And I love that cartoon that we've seen where the gentleman is walking the dog, and the dog's thought bubble has nothing but sunshine and fresh air and blue skies. And then the thought bubble above the owner is cluttered with responsibility and restrictions and rules, et cetera. So again, why that's so important is when we have that genuine joy and intent to heal, what we relate to them is compassion. And what compassion leads to is connection. We all want connection. Connection will lead to relationship, and relationship can provide trust that offers consent. And that is consent in our requests, whether it's verbal consent, whether it's physical requests that we have of them. It will allow more of a connection. There's a hierarchy of needs. And full disclosure, that's one of my house call patients waiting for me to come. So we'll talk about that in a minute. That's gumbo love. And a hierarchy of needs is so important. We've got safety, comfort, play, and food in that order. Animals, if they're not feeling safe or comfort, they aren't going to be interested in treat rewards or playing. And you've all seen that in your own life, with your animals, with your relationships. And survival depends on safety and comfort to be managed before they can actually go into play and food. So Kim, Gumbo Love's owner, and I have a conversation that occurs before I come. I always will let my clients know when I expect to arrive, and so she lets Gumbo Love know that Dr. Janet's coming. And so when I first pull up, I see that little spot in the doorway, and that's Gumbo Love watching for me. And then she had, without me knowing, she had taken a picture of me coming out of my truck when he was there. So I just think that's so precious. And what I love about this is he's a perfect example of when you have decreased stress in your relationship with them and lead with compassion, you have a connection, and that turns to relationship, and that turns to consent. So I want to let you know that there's 4 easily teachable distinctions that can allow you to understand which side of the bed that dog is woken up on, or which side of the corral the horse is woken up on. Combining 2 emotional components and 2 action components. So let's play with that a little bit. So 2 emotional components is being bold or being cautious. And then the 2 action components is whether they're extrovert, needing to move their feet, or whether they're introvert, just having to stay in their little bubble. The bold tendencies you might recognize as being confident, dominant, pushy, playful, stubborn, curious, unconcerned. The cautious tendencies might be fearful, nervous, insecure, defensive, emotional, unconfident, spooky, reactive. Keeping those in mind, you can assess when you walk into a room and you see an animal looking at you in a certain way. They'll either look at you with intent eye contact, they want to look away. You can actually get a sense of whether they're fearful or whether they're bold. Extroverts have to move their feet before they think, and introverts need to think before they decide whether they can or will move their feet. So if we've got a bold extrovert, their motivation may be play with me, because they're not worried about their safety and comfort in that moment. They've got that managed. They're pretty confident. Maybe they're in an environment that they trust. Maybe they're learned responses that people have always been happy and playful with them. Whatever it is, in that moment, they are bold and they are moving their feet and they are happy. And think of the lab that tends to jump on you and want to play. So that's an example of a bold extrovert. And this is one of my patients as well. This is little JJ Beefcakes. And you can just see in his face. Actually, it's a she. I'm sorry, JJ. She is just the happiest dog. And then there's bold introvert. So again, on the bold side, they're not worried about their safety and comfort. They want motivation, play, food. So if they're introverted, they're not going to want to necessarily play until they find out what's in it for me. So there's a motivation that we need to find out. And you can see it in that expression. This cat says, oh, just make it be over, you know? So then we've got the opposite extreme. We've got the cautious extrovert. And you can see I'm using different animal species because this is universal. They all can have access to these different emotional states. So with a cautious extrovert, if they're in a place of safety and comfort being questioned, they're flapping their wings, they're flying into the walls, everything is concerning to them. They need focus. They need something to stop that pattern. Whereas a cautious introvert might be just as terrified on the inside, but they're just catatonic or paralyzed in fear. They just want to have something just disappear, and they want to disappear. So with those in mind, what you can do to help with any of those personalities, let's say you can't decide which side of the fence they woke up on or side of the bed or corral, approach and retreat encourages confidence because every time you approach with a pressure, then back off, they feel more comfortable and confident with that approach, so they will accept the next approach even with more confidence. So pressure can be as minimal as eye contact, remember. And so especially true when you see cats staring at each other. Oftentimes you'll notice that one will blink first, the other will look away. Example of some eye contact. So this dog screams at us exactly what the bandana says: do not pet me, I need my space. So I really applauded this owner for acknowledging that, because she's not quite sure the whole world can read this dog like the dog needs to be read, but that's what I'm hoping everyone here can have access to. It's just some tools to help navigate how we can make this work. So recognizing these concepts and the emotional needs of each current emotional state has the potential to avert catastrophic judgments. Think about it. Think about if we had this beyond the veterinary demographic, like in classrooms. My sister is an 8th grade middle school teacher, and she uses these concepts with her 8th graders, so we can decrease bullying and suicidal ideations. If you can imagine this happening in the police force, every time you see a perpetrator who can't make eye contact with you, it's like, my goodness, you know, is this person just cautious and he just needs me to do a little approach and retreat? So we could decrease excessive force. In the military, my gosh, you know, encounters with each other, assessment of civilians could prevent misconceptions and save lots of lives. And then global leaders, can you imagine if we were to negotiate with global leaders with an emotional currency that causes that leader to have some dignity in whatever decision we make? We could potentially contribute to world peace. That's a breakthrough. Thank you.